And Anil Padmanabhan, senior economic affairs journalist, is joining us to throw more light on this subject. Mr. Padmanabhan, thanks for being with us. Why has the budget, become more important now that we look at it through what the finance minister said, since, we moved away from the planning commission kind of model?
See, Mark, a few things have happened in the last decade. One is, the implementation of the GST. So with the implementation of the GST, a large chunk of revenue raising capability has now got pooled between center and states. So it's no longer either in the center's realm or in the state's realm, but in the collective realm. So in that sense, the union budget got that much more diminished. But what it did is it prioritized expenditure. And what this government has done in the last decade is they've done a bunch of things, like the FM rightly said. They did introduce transparency. In fact, she cleaned the books of all her predecessors and bought a lot of off-budget items on budget, which is very important, because what used to happen was the borrowings were hidden outside the normal purview unless you went behind the budget, which experienced people can figure. But now she's made it transparent, and in that sense, anybody can view these accounts. What you see is what you get. Okay. Now, these two things, combined with the fact that we have had unprecedented economic shocks, beginning with COVID-19, the onset of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and of course, the Fed increasing interest rates so rapidly. So as a result, these economic shocks impacted livelihood and lives in India, and the budget became the central policy point of response for this government. And the way they managed the fisc and dovetailed it with monetary policy, working closely with the Reserve Bank of India, is exactly why India survived the economic shocks and has now recovered, like you rightly pointed out, to among one of the fastest growing countries in the world.
Mr. Padmanabhan, also the finance minister calls it a strategic blueprint for equitable development. How is this made into a reality? After all, it's a document, and this needs more implementation, from the implementation side for it to actually be workable.
See, Mark, like I said earlier, the focus of this budget making has now become expenditure. And in that sense, the transparency they brought in, they took it one step further by pursuing welfare payments, which is where equity principle comes in, by targeting the spending. And how did they target the spending? They basically triangulated and identified the beneficiary using that individual's, her or him, Aadhaar, bank account, and the mobile, what they called the JAM Trinity.
Yes.
So this ensured that the money which was designed for the welfare spending, whether it was for food or any other subsidy, went directly to the bank account of the beneficiary. This may seem theoretically a very simple exercise, but it saved the government exchequer 3 lakh crore. Now that money saved is money earned.
Yes.
That money has been used in several other welfare measures. And let's not forget, the first COVID relief package that the government introduced was 1.70 lakh crore. So cumulatively, the government has saved double of that. So which has freed up its arms to spend more without creating an inflationary impact, without borrowing more. So which is why the budget balancing in the last decade has been brilliant.
Also, Mr. Padmanabhan, the finance minister spoke about, a single nodal agency for every centrally sponsored scheme. So obviously this helps in the implementation, but also how does it streamline expenditure? You talked about expenditures, but the expenditure too is targeted, isn't it, in a sense?
Oh, absolutely. And you see, the expenditure department in the Ministry of Finance has introduced a lot of rules in terms of ensuring accountability of spending. So there are constant monitoring, constant reviews. So some of the flagship programs have been executed based on this kind of close monitoring. Look at drinking water, the Ujjwala cooking gas which has brought cooking gas to over 11 crore people in the families in this country, or the housing scheme. Every one of these schemes are constantly monitored because several of them are GPS enabled. So there is a real-time monitoring. And further, the union government has been encouraging the states also to step up capital spending. Mark, as you know, capital spending creates a multiplier impact on the economy. If you spend 1 rupee in capital expenditure, it has the ability to grow 3 to 4 times of that much of national income. Whereas if you gave it as 1 rupee consumption, it rarely creates that kind of a magnified impact. So the states, to encourage the states to come on board on capital spending, they allowed them relaxed terms of borrowing, which enhanced the fiscal strength of states, created better balance sheets for them to spend, thereby, creating a cumulative impact both on the center and states to push growth in the economy. So in these various ways, expenditure has been streamlined and managed to ensure that there is accountability and bang for the buck.
Also, fiscal prudence is the cornerstone of good budgeting. And we've seen that, she's talked about transparency and fiscal prudence. So how has this actually been achieved? And in short, despite the increase in expenses, like you did mention COVID, there was a contingency expenses increase from 500 crore to 30,000 crore. So, there's a huge additional contingency put in. And that, doesn't look well for fiscal prudence, isn't it?
Oh, yes, absolutely, Mark. I think the COVID impact and the subsequent economic shocks dented the fiscal math of the union government. But to its credit, like I said, they used this moment to clean up the books, come clean. So when there was an overshooting of the fiscal deficit due to a host of these factors, it was a one-time movement. Thereafter, the FM gave a glide path, and because the kind of policies that were adopted post-COVID, the economy recovered. So when the economy recovers, growth gains momentum, revenues also start growing. On the other side, if you have streamlined expenditure, made sure they are accountable, not overspending, minimizing wastage. I did tell you about the cumulative savings of 3 lakh crore. All of this adds up to very good fiscal math, and that we have seen. So despite these shocks, the finance minister, to her credit, has managed and committed to a glide path which is globally acceptable and is remarkable.
We leave it there. Thank you very much, Mr. Anil Padmanabhan, for helping us understand the finance minister's post on budget reforms.